I call this meeting to order. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, I invite you to a PhD defense in the College of Business and Management Science. We have our own colleague, friend, son, Fred Maniragaba, who is going to share with us his expertise knowledge on life of the elderly, or quality of life of the elderly in rural Uganda. So we are here to witness, but also at the same time judge his expertise in this area. As we all know, the issue of aging is becoming a global concern, and particularly the quality of the elderly. In some other countries, we know that 40% of the active age is working to support 60% of the elderly. This is in some countries like Far East, Thailand, Japan, etc., etc. So this study is very, very timely in trying to guide our country, particularly policymakers, to come up with appropriate interventions to handle issues of the elderly or their quality of life. So we expect to take like 2.5 hours in performing this function of the defense. Allow me to introduce to you very, very key people in this process. I will start with the panelists. The first one on my line is Dr. Valerie Boras. I don't know that I pronounced it, and we have to. Thank you so much, Professor, for coming. She is the critical reader or the opponent who is going to interact or engage with our candidate to really test his competence, his knowledge, and expertise in that area. Also, we have Professor James Ntozi, our elderly statesman in this university. Professor, most welcome. Can you be able to? He is the supervisor for the candidates. We have Dr. Kwagala. Thank you so much, Doctor, for coming. We also have Professor Leonard Atwaire, who is a doctoral committee member. Professor, most welcome. Dr. Annette Nakwanga. Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor, for coming. Dr. Abel Zabona. Thank you. We have Dr. Stephen Wandera, a panel examiner who happens to be the chair and where the candidate is doing his PhD. So, other members will be introducing as we move along the presentation, but just allow me to say one important small thing, that we have a place of convenience on the ground floor. So our visitors, if you feel like visiting the restrooms, just move down on your immediate left. So I think without wasting much time, because we want to manage the time very well, according to the guidelines here, the chair is given just 5 minutes to make the introductory remarks, We shall hear more from Fred regarding issues of the quality of life of the elderly when it comes to, it may say, physical fitness, but also the general quality of life of the elderly people. So without wasting much time, allow me to invite Mr. Fred Maniragaba to make a presentation, and according to the guidelines, Mr. Fred, you have about 35 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm called Maniragaba Fred, and I've just said. And this morning I'm happy to share with you my work entitled The Determinants of Quality of Life of Older Persons in rural Uganda. And my supervisors are Dr. Kwagala and Professor Ntozi. In this presentation, I'll briefly talk about the introduction of the study. I'll also look at program statement, objectives, I'll look at the hypothesis, conceptual framework, results, recommendations, and conclusions. By way of introduction, United Nations defines older persons as persons aged 60 years and above, and Uganda as a country also adopts a similar definition, and it is upon the same definition that the current study is based. Globally, the population of older persons is currently at 962 million, and it is projected to be 2 billion by 2050. In Uganda, this population is increasing steadily, and for instance, in 1991, this population was around 700,000, and it increased to 1.1 million in 2002, and to 1.4 in 2014. This population is expected to be around 5.4 in 2050. What is not clear, however, is that we don't know whether this population is increasing at the same rate with their quality of life. World Health Organization defines quality of life as an individual's perception in their position of life, and in particular in the context of culture and value systems in which they live, and also in relation with their goals, expectations, values, and even concerns. To be able to understand this concept of quality of life, two approaches are used. The first approach is objective quality of life. This one is concerned with the way how external factors affect an individual's quality of life. These factors in most cases could be culture, environment in which an individual lives, and sometimes health systems. And the other approach is subjective quality of life. This one is about how an individual perceives their life to be. It is upon this approach that the current study is anchored. The advantage with this approach is that when you are dealing with an individual, especially when you are a researcher, an individual gives a full account of how their life is, and therefore this approach is associated with highly reliable data. Quality of life has got very many dimensions. The first one is death and dying, past, present, and future activities, autonomy, intimacy, social participation, physical health, and others. The current study, however, is based on only three, which are physical health, intimacy, and social participation. Because these are more relevant to the local environment, especially for the older persons. The problem statement, older persons are increasing in number, especially here in Uganda, mostly because of reduction in adult mortality and also improved life expectancy, which now stands at 63 years as of 2014. Thus far, older persons have a right to a good quality of life. That's why even these international policies, especially on aging, have it that older persons should actually have a good quality of life. Like the Madrid International Policy Action on Aging of 2002 and even Uganda's policy all agree that older persons should have improved quality of life. However, much as quality of life is important, it remains understudied in Uganda, whereby some studies which have been done on aging focus mainly on other areas like chronic poverty, vulnerability, and others. And this concept really remains understudied, and therefore there is scarce of information to direct policy even when our society is experiencing some social changes such as modernization, which has led to the breakdown of social ties, whereby older persons no longer have closeness with their children. For instance, after education, some of the children decided to stay away from their parents, where they don't regularly support them. Urbanization is also somehow affecting older persons' quality of life, because, for instance, when you look at low urban migration, this one involves mainly energetic younger people who move to towns and sometimes encounter challenges of modernization, like unemployment. And therefore, in most cases, they are in a position where they are unable to support their parents, which they live in villages. The state has also not done much to improve the quality of life of older persons. Much as, for instance, the government of Uganda has tried to come up with social assistance, social assistance to do with empowerment, whereby the government is giving now 25,000 shillings to each older person who is 65 years and above. Moreover, the same policy is not rolled out to the rest of the country. It covers a few parts of the country. And even then, what is surprising is that since there is no sufficient data on quality of life, the policy of which they are using is not clear, so this cannot actually easily improve the quality of life of older persons. The current study therefore helps to fill existing knowledge gap for appropriate policy formulation. Objectives of the study. The main objective of this study is to establish determinants of quality of life of older persons in rural Uganda, and specifically to examine the factors that influence physical health of older persons, and also to establish the factors that affect intimacy among older persons in rural Uganda. And the other objective is to assess the factors that predict social participation among older persons. And lastly, to evaluate the factors that determine the overall quality of life of older persons in rural Uganda. And these are hypotheses guiding the study, and the first one is older persons who receive health care support are more likely to have good physical health compared to those who do not receive. Number two, older persons who are wealthy are more likely to have high intimacy levels compared to the ones who are poor. Older persons who get financial or material support are more likely to participate socially compared to those who are not financially supported. Educated older persons are more likely to socially participate compared to those who are not educated. And male older persons are more likely to have good quality of life compared to their female counterparts. This is a theoretical framework which guides this study. In brief, this study is adopted from integrative theory of quality of life. For instance, the concept of well-being in this theory is affected by many factors, such as health status of individuals, which is an indicative of physical health. The fulfillment of individuals' needs also affects social participation, which is a domain in this study. Satisfaction in life with variables such as proper usage of time is also indicative of social participation domain in the current study. That's the concept of happiness, which encompasses love and love ties, is also indicative of intimacy domain, which is under study in the current study. This is the conceptual framework which guides this study, and it is adapted from the integrative quality of life theory, and also from the World Health Organization quality of life instruments such as World Health Organization quality of life brief and old. You can see at this point these are underlying factors which are purely socioeconomic and demographic factors which work with social support. These are intermediate variables. So economic factors work with social support, social network, and even accessibility to information to influence the dimensions of physical health, and thereafter they influence the overall quality of life. Methodology. This study is purely a cross-sectional concurrent mixed methods approach or design, which combines both qualitative and quantitative data. Sampling. This study used the multi-stage stratified cluster sampling to select the study sample. At first, Uganda was stratified into 4 major regions, and then the rest of the sampling took place at each stage. But maybe what I need to note is that at each stage and across the board, simple random sampling with the help of goldfish or method was used to select the required sample. For instance, from each region, 1 district was sampled, and from the district, 3 sub-counties were selected, and then from each sub-county, 4 villages were selected, and thereafter, a sampling frame was generated with the help of community leaders conversant with their areas to select 10 households within which the final interviews were conducted. This is the structure of the sampling. First, I have Uganda. This is Uganda. Then these are regions. For instance, Western region, I think Kwagala, then Central, Kayunga, Northern, Otuke, and then Eastern. I have at sub-county level, as I have said, these sub-counties were selected, and many villages were selected. And the final sample size was 912 respondents. This is a map of Uganda showing study sites. As I have already said, northern Uganda, this is Otuke district, which was studied, then central, then eastern, and western region. With the qualitative data, a purposive sampling was used to select two focus group discussants, or to do two group discussions, one for male and another one for females. And this one was done per district. Two key informants were also conducted in every district, and mainly these key informants were done with the community development officers and leaders of elders in those places. Maybe to say that with the focus group discussion, so data collection, quantitative data was done using a structured questionnaire, which was translated into local languages where this study was done. For instance, in Kwagala, Western Uganda, it was translated into Michigan, and subsequently it was a similar case to other areas. Research assistants were trained and equipped with ethical issues and skills to administer this questionnaire, and they were able to collect information from the respondents. With quantitative data, 8 focus group discussions were done using focus group discussion guide, and similarly, key informant interviews were done using key informant interviews, and data were recorded using digital recorder. Measurement of dependent variables. Physical health dimension was measured by 10 questions based on 5 areas, such as activities of daily living, pain, sleep, and others. Intimacy was measured by 4 questions based on 3 areas, such as opportunity to be loved, and then opportunity to love, plus sexual activity. Social participation was measured based on 8 questions on 4 areas, such as proper usage of time, participation in community activities, and others. Then the 3 dimensions mentioned above generated an index of quality of life. Data analysis, before this analysis was done, this data was the data were weighted to correct the imperfections, mostly resulting from selecting units with unequal probabilities. And thereafter, frequency distributions were computed to describe the characteristics of respondents. Fact analysis was done to reduce the very many variables under these dimensions, because it would not be possible to do a practical analysis using all of them. Eigenvalues value criteria was used to identify the factors with high loading magnitude to be retained, and from these indices, thereafter, the latent constructs were categorized into three. Each one of them was categorized into three. One, poor, fair, and good. For instance, if it was physical health, it was categorized into poor physical health, good, and then fair. Likewise, this cut across all other domains. Thereafter, the categories of these domains were summed up to generate the index of the overall quality of life. Ordinal logistic regression model was used to determine the factors that affect quality of life, and to correct or to check the appropriateness of this model, linked test was used, and also multicollinearity was tested using Spearman's correlation to make sure that the variables were not correlated. With the qualitative data, the data were transcribed with verbatim, and transcripts were actually in English. And thereafter, deductive thematic analysis was done to get out those patterns which are of interest and all which answer study objectives. With the ESCO consideration, this study obtained clearance from an institutional review board called National HIV AIDS Research Committee. It was also cleared by the National Council for Science and Technology, plus the Office of the President. Relevant authorities were also visited, especially local leaders in the places where we visited, and permission was granted. Lastly, voluntary informed consent was sought from the participants, both informants and the older persons, where we collected the survey data, and so they granted us permission to go ahead and conduct the data collection. Results. This graph shows results of the selected background characteristics of the respondents. For instance, this bar shows that other persons in terms of occupation, and the majority of them close to 70% were farmers. 57% of the respondents were females, and those who were married were 51%. To remind ourselves of the objectives, the first objective is to establish the factors that influence physical health among other persons. And these are indicators of physical health, as you can see in the table. But more interestingly, we find that a majority of them, a large proportion of them, that's 50%, said that they always get tired even when they have not done much work. Finally, 55% of them said that they have enough energy, and 55% of them said that they always experience difficulty in sleeping. This paragraph shows self-reported diseases. Self-reported diseases, as you can see, most of the other persons, a high proportion of other persons reported that they had high blood pressure, and others reported various diseases as illustrated in the graph. These are the multivariate results showing the factors that affect physical health of the older person. This blue line, lying horizontally, indicates reference category across all the significant variables in this graph. And all these blue bars which are blue are also showing the reference category for each variable on this graph. And for instance, any variable which has got this asterisk indicates that it is significant in that particular variable. That's the way you can see here and here and the rest. So to maybe it a bit age, when a person is who are 80 years old and above, they are more likely to have low physical health compared to their counterparts in the age of 60 to 69. Likewise, but this one, mostly the reason why physical health among the older persons in this age bracket is because of mentally all the age ailments which actually affect the physical health of older persons. If you can look at the wealth index, older persons who are in the middle quintile of the wealth index, then the richer and the richest are also more likely to have good physical health compared to those who were poor. And the issue will be that when you have some resources to use in your household, you can always find it easy to access health services anywhere. So you can see this point here. This is to do with physical activity. You can see that when a person who used to do physical activity like exercising, are more likely to have, actually we are 2 times more likely to have good physical health compared to those who are not doing any activity. So these moving bars, I'm sure I should have maybe illustrated them, indicating that this value, these categories in each variable has significance. I should have those are significant variables. So this picture indicates two other persons exercising. So when you exercise, you're more likely to have qualitative inquiry, especially in respect with age. So you saw that the age actually affects the other person's quality of life, in physical health. So in qualitative inquiry, a participant in a focus group discussion dynamically had this to say, to show that age actually influences physical health among other persons. Here it reads, for me, almost the whole body, headache, for the eyes, I can no longer see. I see 2 persons in one. I have severe chest pain, ulcers, pressure, hernia. All of these are on the same person. These legs are dead. No wonder you see that I can't walk. The whole body is dead. This is from a participant, a male participant in Kwagala district. So to remind ourselves of the second objective, which is about intimacy, these are indicators of intimacy. You can see the couple which is smiling. So these are multivariate results which show the determinants of intimacy. And just like I said, the horizontal line is giving reference category, and the moving bars are actually indicating that these categories within each index, we find that other persons who were in the middle quintile of the welfare index were nearly 2 times more likely to have high intimacy age with its association with the intimacy. And this is derived from the participant in the focus group discussion in the district, in the district Liberia, pardon. And this participant had this to say: there is no problem with sex as such. We are just tired. And this is a woman, by the way. We are just tired. But men do not tire. We overwork ourselves to the extent of not even thinking about sex. We are so tired and fed up, so we have left that our children and grandchildren. In fact, some of us whose spouses are still alive even seem to be separate from our spouses. So this is the objective today, which is assessing the factors that affect social participation. And again, these are the indicators of social participation, where majority of them, 82%, are reported that they need to participate in the religious functions, and 81% need to participate in the various options, and again, this one is used to list friends. These are like various results which show the factors that affect social participation. Again, as you can see, the moving bar indicating the reference, the significant categories within each variable. And as you can see, that for instance, older persons in the age bracket of 20 years and above, they are more likely to participate socially compared to their counterparts in the age bracket of 60 to 69. The reason here is simple. Most likely, these older persons are treated to be high experiences in their villages and all communities where they live. And so they are respected, they give advice, the young ones. So if there is anything, they are always consulted. That's why in most cases they participate more than their relatively younger counterparts in the age of 60 to 69. With the marital status, you can see that older persons who were widowed, and even those who have divorced, the widowed were 2 times more likely to participate in social engagement, and this one is also almost 2 times more likely to participate in social engagement. The reason here could be a state of loneliness, whereby these people used to participate in order to minimize the loneliness they had with associated health implications. Control over resources. Older persons whose resources were controlled by, whose household resources were controlled by their children, were 4 times more likely to participate socially. Maybe people should not be confused and think that maybe this is a good thing on the side of older persons. The idea behind would probably mean that these older persons were vulnerable. In most cases, when your resources are taken over by your children, you are left with nothing. So by socially participating, going to churches, community activities, sometimes you are trying to attract people to support you. This is a qualitative inquiry on the social participation, and this quotation was made in reference to age, how age influences the other person's social participation. And this was made by a woman participant in the Kwagala district. And here it reads that older people participating in community-based associations, such as Batakakwezi groups, or barrio groups, There are those for men and women separately, which play an important role in advancing the values and norms associated with female rights to young women. Objective 4. This is about evaluation of factors that determine physical health. But as I said, this concept of quality of life was developed from the 3 dimensions of quality of life, which are social participation, intimacy, and physical health, which together actually, with that category is combined to develop this quality of life as I explained in the methodology. And this graph shows the respondents with their physical health, quality of life. The graph indicates that over 50% of them were in the fair index, while 37 of them were poor, and those who had good quality of life were only 14%. And these are determinants, multivariate determinants. These are showing determinants of quality of life. The score will not change. The same bar, the same line is indicating the reference category. And as you can see again, moving the bars covering those bars indicate categories within the variables that were significant. So, regarding the sex, older persons who are male were more likely to have good quality of life compared to their female counterparts. And the reason it would be probably the other issue of physiological related issues. For instance, as I said, that in most cases the postmenopausal deficiencies affect the quality of life and all physical well-being of older persons who are women. In terms of sex of wellness index, you can see that older persons who were in the middle of wellness index, we are more than 2 times likely to have good quality of life compared to the poorest. This is related to socioeconomic status, which probably enables other persons to have access to medical services and also to have some good lifestyle in terms of diet and others. Other persons who were HIV seronegative are less likely to have good physical health because in most cases yes, positive. This one is more likely to have a poor quality of life because of stigma-related issues and other physical health or the age ailments. This qualitative inquiry supports the quantitative findings and the reference to where the status of individuals. For instance, a key informant in Uganda district had this to say in reference to how where the status affects the quality of life of older persons. And it reads that most of the older persons in this area lack basic needs like shelter, and most of them reside in grass, thatched mud, and bundle houses. Standard limitation or limitations. This study, as I said, is based on subjective quality of life. It does not look at the objective quality of life, which would have actually enriched the study findings if they are possible. But as the study stands, realistic issues would not allow are the two approaches to be looked at the same time. It also is based on self-reported responses, and therefore there are no medical examinations done to prove exactly the perceived responses other persons were giving. So in most cases, there could have been some challenges somewhere. By a way of conclusion, physical health was positively associated with the engagement in physical activity, and also controlling household assets by other persons. I beg your pardon. Controlling household assets that to their children. The other conclusion is that intimacy was positively associated with the belonging to neutral quintile of wealth index compared to the poorest one. And being a male was also associated with having a high intimacy. Social participation was associated with being uneducated compared to being educated. Being widowed was also associated with high social participation. And good quality of life was positively associated with being male and having HIV seropositive status. Recommendations. These recommendations are based on study conclusions, and they are as follows. Older persons should be encouraged to embrace active aging and, among other things, to do physical exercises in order to remain physically healthy. In addition, younger people should also be encouraged to remain active so that when they reach old age, they are able to be physically healthy and strong. Other persons should be empowered to manage their household assets. As you can see, those whose assets are managed by their children are in most cases not doing well in terms of in terms of quality of life. Other persons should also be empowered economically through schemes such as SAGE and other government schemes. This SAGE should actually be enrolled in the rest of the country, and the amount of money given to other persons should also be increased to make a meaningful, to make an impact in the quality of life of other persons. Social groups should target educated other persons with their partners to encourage them to participate in community activities. You can see that other persons who are educated actually are not socially participate like those ones. So in other words, these ones should also be encouraged to do so. Or in one cases, maybe add some light on this one. When you are educated and you are working in an urban area, you happen to retire to your village, you find people there who are educated. Sometimes it's hard to freely interact with them because you see they see as a social kind of risk. So they carry HIV prevention interventions should target older persons as well. You see, there is this notion that older persons cannot contract HIV through AIDS. And most programs actually target younger people. Even behind this, they should as well be better before. Propose the future research. I propose that the further research should be done on other dimensions of physical health. Because as you have seen, I looked at only 3 of them, but others are not studied. So it will be interesting to study the remaining dimensions. Investigations should also be carried out on quality of life using objective approach. This study has so far generated two publications. The first publication is in a journal called African Academy of Science and Development Research. The other one is in Close One Journal, and there are some manuscripts which are under review. The first one is exploring intimacy in old age, a case of Uganda's law setting. The second one is social participation among other persons in rural Uganda. The current study acknowledges, and in particular myself, I acknowledge CATA, this is a consortium for African research and training in Africa, which partially funded this study. I'm grateful to this program. Makerere University also granted me a tuition waiver, and I'm grateful. The Directorate of Research and Graduate Training in Makerere, I thank the leadership, especially Associate Professor Owine and his boss, Professor Minka. They encouraged and supported me. The former Dean, Madame Agnes, thank you so much for creating that good environment within which I was able to study comfortably and finish my study. Thank you so much. My supervisors, Dr. Betty Kwagala and Professor Ntozi. In fact, they have not only supervised my work, they've been my great teachers, and I'm grateful that they have been able to make me the person I am today. Thank you. The doctoral committee members, Associate Professor Zina Aile, Dr. Ntavona, Anet Nakwanda. God bless you for guiding me. Thank you for guiding me. Staff members in the School of Statistics and CoBAMS in general, thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your support. I have a family which I belong to called Kata. We have a class of us. I'm glad one of us is around Dr. Kenya, please, and the rest of the family. God bless you for supporting and helping me. I also thank key informants, research assistants, and above all, the respondents of this study. If they are not them, this study would not have been done. And finally, to my family, I'm grateful. Above all, may the glory be to you. I was actually motivated by my grandmother, who died at the age 121. Actually, when she died, I looked around to see whether there was anybody crying, just like that. Looking at my father could cry when she his mother. My auntie, who is now 95, also refused to cry. That is the first time I saw people actually dancing and running, sounds of joy. And I said, no, I should actually do academic. We should not age.
Thank you, Ed, for such a great presentation. No doubt you have all the reasons to do it. Some of us who are around, we know the journey you have traveled. We know the journey you have traveled, and really we are happy for that. So in the remaining 90 minutes, we shall have a face-to-face engagement, intellectual discourse between the opponent and the discussant or the candidate. And let us try to manage the time, colleagues, such that we don't stay at the order. Then thereafter we shall have questions from the committee members. That one should last not more than 20 minutes. Then we shall also have the public audience asking questions, clarifications, comments. It should not go beyond 10 minutes. Then thereafter we shall retreat. It will be a retreat of only examination committee members to deliberate on Freddy's facts. Thereafter we shall announce the verdict and we close. So without wasting much time, I invite Professor Varedi to have an intellectual discussion with the candidate, and we shall be so much happy to have that engagement, because at this material time you are like a judge. If you are not properly convinced, then Fred may be referred back for some time. So we expect you to have that discourse in about 30 minutes. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good morning. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful actually to be here with you today, and I would like to address my heartfelt thanks to the college, of course, to the graduate school, and Mr. Chairman for inviting me to sit on this very important day and to discuss this dissertation. On a personal note, I would like to say I'm very happy to see this PhD coming to a happy conclusion. Very, very happy indeed, because like many of you, maybe, I'm aware of the difficulties that you faced, Mr. Maniragaba, during the course of this PhD, and I was very much afraid that you would not complete this dissertation. So hard work and perseverance have made the best of the situation, I see, and I wish to commend you for that. And I also would like to thank and commend the supervisors, the college, the graduate school, and all the colleagues here to have supported you and to support you along this journey. So, Mr. Maniragaba, you might think that you're reaching the end of your journey. But this is just among the first steps. So I'm also here to remind you that the way is still long, and that academic scholarship goes on, and you keep learning and being bashed and learning again and improving and doing better every time until the end, I guess, of your career. So welcome in the world of the academician. Maybe it's too early to say so, though. So I would like to give my comments on your dissertation. I would like to thank you for a very clear presentation that has already answered some of my questions. So that was very good. This dissertation, entitled Determinants of Quality of Life of Older Persons in Rural Uganda, is, I find, a very well presented piece of academic writing. Maybe for everyone to follow, because you might not have the dissertation in hand, it comprises 9 chapters, a list of references, and 15 appendices at the end. The 9 chapters include the introduction, a chapter that is dedicated, the introduction presents the background of the study, of course. Then there's a literature review, then a methodological chapter, and then we enter into discussing the findings. So the first chapter of analysis shows general results about the survey that was done, the data that was collected, and then it is followed by 4 chapters, each of them answering some of the objectives that were raised in the beginning of the dissertation. So one deals with physical health, one with intimacy, one with social participation, and then there's the final one on quality of life. And this is followed by the conclusion and recommendations, and that's it. So I would like to say that the appendixes were very useful, very informative, and that I really liked the rigor you had in presenting all these documents, all this material that was very useful in understanding and in following the process of your PhD. So thank you very much for this. I also enjoyed very much the photos you included in your dissertation. I know you wanted to really take us maybe through southwestern Uganda. I was wondering why you didn't put photos of the other regions. I think there's a bias here. So, I was asked to tell you about the merits and demerits of each chapter. So I will go following the order of your dissertation. So if I start with chapter 1, the background, this introductory chapter gives the background of the study and includes problem statement, objectives, hypothesis, significance, conceptual framework that you presented already as well, before providing the layout of the dissertation. As the problem is the absence of data on the quality of life of older person, you don't give any background figures in this introduction, but that's normal, maybe. You use the literature to introduce us to the challenges faced by older persons in Uganda, the policies put in place by the Uganda government to counter these challenges, and the need for more data, for producing new data on this, on which to base policies. And you introduce us also the very important concept of quality of life that is now the topic that is dealt with in the whole of the study. So chapter 1 is very concise. It successfully brings the reader to the heart of the topic, assessing the quality of life of older persons in a subjective approach and investigating its determinants. So I really like the way you introduce the topic. So the very first pages really take you into the study very efficiently. I would need to say, though, that I don't agree with one of your statements that keeps coming back in this introduction, that is that aging is currently increasing in Uganda. Because you yourself used the last census figures, and if you look at the proportions of older people in the last census, you show that it's actually been decreasing from 5% in 91 to 4.5 in 2002, and then 4% only in 2014. So also the figures are increasing, the proportions are not. So we're not in a stage of aging. We're not in the aging process yet in Uganda. It doesn't mean that your study is not valuable. On the contrary, we know that the aging process will take place and that it will be quite fast, and that Uganda needs to be prepared for that. So what you have done is very important, but you should make clear in the introduction where it stands. I do think that more development is needed, however, for the reader to understand your perspective better. For instance, you mentioned the 3 dimensions of aging that you picked, and of not aging, but of quality of life for older people. So you told us about physical health, intimacy, and social participation, among others. And you said you chose those because they were the most relevant in the context of rural Uganda. But what does that mean? Does it mean that death and dying are not important dimensions for older people in rural Uganda? You know? We also need to comprehend better what the various dimensions of quality of life you use stand for in each of these domains. For instance, when you talk about companionship, what does it mean? How is it related to quality of life? You know, sometimes what is involved in the dimensions of quality of life you're studying might not be clear to the reader. So, for instance, when you mention family caregiver or friends, how are they related to quality of life? Is it having family care that matters to older people to give them a better quality of life? Is it being a caregiver? Because I've heard that quite a lot. Older people are really happy to also provide care for others. Having friends, does it mean having good friends, having many good friends, and so on. So I think we're missing some definitions here, and we're missing a proper introduction of each of the concepts that is used in the dissertation. Maybe I should give you the ground when you need to answer, or I don't know. And then, in this background, I think there's some important studies that were left out, maybe because you mentioned some of the literature here, so if I may start a bit on this. and ask you, I'm wondering, because there has been a study on the well-being of older people in Uganda, led by the World Health Organization. By the way, it's called SAGE as well, so there's always a confusion between the SAGE Plan for Empowerment and the SAGE study of the well-being of older people. Data was collected in Kwagala and in rural central Uganda in 2009-2013, and this is never mentioned in the chapter, neither in terms of publications or in terms of data or in terms of background. So I want to also ask you why you didn't choose to use that.
Would you finish something?
You want me to finish everything before I answer? Well, there would be a lot of questions to answer. Chapter 2 about the literature. I will go on this because it's related. The general literature is mobilized in the dissertation, so at different stages it's used in the background chapter, as I already mentioned. It's used in the literature review chapter, of course, and it's then mobilized again for discussing the findings of all the analysis chapters. So that is very good, and other references are quoted properly. They appear in the reference list, if I'm not wrong. And so that's all right. The literature review chapter now is structured according to a succession of themes corresponding to the variables in the subsequent analysis, if I understand that. So each section presents insights of some previous academic work in which this theme or this variable has been analyzed, crossed with quality of life, and then the results are presented and compared for this study. So we have literature from all over the world, of course, that deals with quality of life and other variables, and their association is commented. So this is excellent, but it leaves out a lot. So I would like maybe to ask you how you focused your literature review. Because you mentioned it in section 2.1, but it's still not clear to me. And I think many fields of academic research have passed through the mesh of your net. For instance, each variable or theme that is presented in the structure of this chapter is not systematically crossed with the 3 dimensions of quality of life that you study. If I take the example of age, you deal with age in the literature review in a general way, together with quality of life, but you never put it in relation to physical health or to intimacy or to social participation. So that's just an example, but this maybe should give the way to all the variables also. Then the interaction between variables is not documented, although this has been done in the literature. If I take the example of sex again, no, sex I will have this, it was age. I can take the example of sex and marital status. Sex is addressed, it's followed by marital status in the literature review, and we learn, for instance, that there's no significance in quality of life between old men and old women in some countries, but that in many others there is, and that older men are usually better off than older women in that term. Then we're told married older persons are found to be better off than unmarried or widowed or separated divorced ones. And so the link between those 2 domains is not made, although we know that older men are more likely to be married than older women, who very often are widows. And so there's a very clear link. It's in the literature in many documents, but this is not tackled in the literature review. And then there are major pieces in the literature that do not appear there. So I would start very basically with a paper from Professor Kwagala here on diabetes. That doesn't appear, diabetes and quality of life of older persons. So I don't know whether that one really start on that one. But there are large domains that also are concerned, like qualitative work done on older persons in rural Uganda, in eastern Uganda and central Uganda mainly, is the regions I know more about maybe, where I found some documents that were very relevant to your study, although they might not call quality of life what they assess, because they're dealing with the daily life of older people and their satisfaction and their happiness and the way they deal with their daily chores and their responsibilities and their status and all that. But this is relevant to your work. It's very relevant. And it's not there. Then there are other references about the quality of life of people in Uganda, but not specifically dealing with older people. But some of these papers have applied exactly the same methodology you are applying. And so it is relevant because they've worked on the quality of life of people in Uganda using similar methodologies, although not on older persons. So this might inform you, actually, and confirm your study as also being relevant. So there's a need to be using that. So I wanted to know whether you knew, for instance, about that paper that was written by Zhao in 2016. And in that paper, it's a study of the quality of life of younger people in Uganda, not older. But it's very interesting because what it tells about is not only the quality of life of younger people, but there's also a theoretical development on the relativity of the concept of quality of life. And this is something that should not tackle as well. It's the way this quality of life concept might differ according to the country, for instance, and it might even differ according to the region in Uganda. So, for instance, what people will value as being important to define their own quality of life might not be the same in my country and in yours. And so I was wondering, I think this is very important in actually understanding what quality of life is in a subjective perspective for the older people you're studying themselves. And then it also helps understanding the literature and understanding the contradictions in the literature, because some variables might not stick out as being relevant or significant in specific contexts when they actually are in others. So this is not a contradiction as such, it's just relativity. Then, last point about the literature, I think there's an ambiguity in the way you present some of the results in this literature, because it's not very clear how correlations, if what you present are simple correlations, meaning that two variables are related, quality of life and age, or let's say, I don't know, social participation are related. There is a correlation, a significant correlation between them in some countries, in some paper that was written in the literature, or if there's a causal dimension, there's a sense in the direction in what has been found in the paper you analyze. Like, is it physical activity that actually influences physical health, or is it just a correlation? So things like that. So I think this is something that needs, and it's okay.
I think, yeah, we ask you to respond to those comments, questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Professor, for the comments. Beginning with the increase of older persons in absolute terms, I'm looking for questions. Usually proportion is actually not bring out the actual figure, the actual picture of what is happening in the ground. Proportions may not increase, but absolute numbers increase. And so in most cases, when the policies are being made, they are based on absolute numbers. But this one, I think I'm going to look at it appropriately. Choosing only the 3 dimensions, physical intimacy and the social participation, and calling them more relevant to the rural setting and living with others. I think I need to rephrase my statement. Yes, they are relevant and others are relevant, but I could not actually choose all of them because in most cases I was constrained by the list of issues. Otherwise, I'm going to rectify this one. How is the companionship related to quality of life? I think I'm going to get more insight on this and then clarify. What about fact paper? I'm going to actually revisit the literature and align them with these variables. I'm missing the definitions of some concepts. And again, some studies which are important that I have not actually included in the background of the study. I think I'll be able to go back as I have already said and look at literature and include the important information from these sources. Chapter 2, literature review. I have noted every observation you have made. And also, I think, in general terms, I need to go back and look at the literature and align these important variables to quality of life with its dimensions. So I think the answer on literature review is to align these important socioeconomic factors to the concept of quality of life.
Thank you very much. About the methodology, I think it's important to underline your efforts there in collecting data on the quality of life of older persons. Using a national data set from your boss and constructing your own database in a PhD is not the same work, and it's not the same effort. I think it's... I'm commending you for having collected data. Yeah? I would also like to underline the originality of the database created, dealing with subjective perceptions of quality of life among older persons. So this is a big effort. It led to more than 900 questionnaires filled, and in 4 different regions of the country, plus some qualitative material. So all this appears well in the methodology section, in the study design, and in the subsequent sections. Whereas the tools for qualitative interviews I mentioned in this chapter, the questionnaire is left out. It's not presented, it's not discussed. The choices made are not argued, choices in terms of questions, choices in terms of the flow of the questions, which is slightly different to your grade of analysis. So we need that to have presented somewhere. Why is it hidden in the appendices? In the appendices is one of the questions I was wondering. Then the fact that there are only 2 key informant interviews by district. That one needs to be justified and documented. Why 2 only? You mentioned page 47, a list of actors that you interviewed in these key informant interviews. I have to give you the list. Persons in charge of older persons in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Local councils, community-based organizations working with older people, as well as community development offices at the district headquarters. NGOs and CBOs working with older people. Now, and you did only 2 per district. So who are those? Why? Are they comparable? Are they similar persons in each district? Huh? And then you mentioned in your dissertation that you were expecting to find couples, like couples of older persons in each of the households. And we know we have 480 households in this sample. And you were expecting to get couples and then to have about 900 and something that would fulfill your sample rules and be okay. You didn't get couples. That's what you say. Only 50% are married. But you still have 912 respondents. So I was wondering where they come from. What about this other half that are not married? Does that mean that there were older people living together as brothers and sisters, maybe? Or did you find older people elsewhere? I will go on with chapter 4. characteristics of the respondents and households. So this is a very important chapter because the data used in the dissertation is new, of course, so we need to know basic findings, basic facts about the respondents. And it brings out a first descriptive analysis of the sample. So the strength of this chapter is that this is done very systematically for the variables used in the analysis that comes after. And it's here that we get to actually understand better how physical health, intimacy, and social participation are approached through the questions that are asked and the possible answers. So you present in your last tables in this chapter analysis of the distributions of answers for these questions that actually help you build what physical health, social participation, and so on are. So what I feel is that we need to follow your reasoning better, and you need to help us do that. And what I'm questioning here is the link between what was asked to the other people who were your respondents, what is in the questionnaire, in appendix, and what you actually use in your data analysis. So the way you framed and you built your variables for analysis. For a few variables, I do not see from which question they stem. So this should be clarified. So it comes in, for instance, for having children. It's never asked anywhere in the questionnaire. Do you have children? I don't know what this question stands for. Does it mean that they have children that are still alive, maybe? Does it mean something else? I don't know. But it also comes in, I also would like to ask about the wealth index, because there's no wealth index anywhere. So how was this built? Is it you who decided on how to build a wealth index from this data that you have? This should be presented. It's very important because it's one of the major variables up to the end of the study. Yet we don't know where it comes from. Correlations between variables are not studied. The models that you use, logistic regression, they have as a strong hypothesis that the variables you put in the models are independent. Now, so you need to study the interaction between those variables, and you need to actually remove those that are too correlated to each other. So did you check for correlations? Globally, I would like to say, I think there should be a direct, flowing, clear correspondence between different aspects that are found in different places in your dissertation. The questionnaire, one. The outcome variables that you presented us in your conceptual framework, outcome variables for each of the dimensions of quality of life, two. The summary that you present here, that's in the methodological chapter in table 3.2 that mentions the variables that are used in the models. And then the questions that you mention in those tables at the end of chapter 4, where you go through the frequency analysis, the distribution of the answers for these questions. But we don't see a clear correspondence between all those, so we don't know exactly now how you actually built your indicators in the end, and what each question, where the variables come from, how they were built, what they actually refer to, and so on. And so this is, to me, a major issue in this work, and it needs clarification. Then I'm wondering about the way you built your quality of life indicator, because in the tables you present, those tables at the end of chapter 4, that you also presented us. Actually, you gave us the one on intimacy, for instance. These tables, they show you the different aspects of intimacy, for instance, if I keep to this example, that are dealt with. So there are 4 lines, each corresponding to a question, and we know whether the person agreed, strongly disagreed, and so on about these statements. But there, some are positive statements and some are negative statements, which means that sometimes if you disagree with the negative statement, doesn't mean you agree with the positive one. And how did you build your indicator in the end? Did you just take all the positive statements, or did you give some value to the statement as being positive or negative in a different way? So this is very important in the construction of your variable, and it's not explained anywhere in the dissertation, so I would like you to give us more information on that.
Okay, great. Response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Doctor, for the observations made. I'll begin with methodology. On the issue of questionnaire which is not well explained in the methodology, I need to check this and correct accordingly. And now to justify why two informant interviews were done in the methodology, and possibly because I have indicated that I am going to interact with many other people other than the ones I interacted with, like community development officers and leaders of other persons groups. As I have said, I was constrained by logistical issues, but I think I need to go back and correct and align this methodology with my findings. So those persons I do not actually know have this, I will be able to adjust accordingly.
Mr. Maniragaba, I don't think it's a question of going back to the field, but maybe adjusting
Yes,
the
I'm saying that the persons I do not see, for instance, in the ministry of gender, labor and social development, I have to remove them because they are not part of the finance. Okay, I'm going to check and correct accordingly. Chapter 4. There are variables which I am analyzing in my model and not appearing in the questionnaire. Having children, I think I remember very well this variable is in the questionnaire. And as I said from the beginning, this questionnaire was adapted from the standard instrument of World Health Organization, Quality of Life, Belief, and also integrative theory of quality of life. But I had some modifications because I was not validating this tool from Uganda. So some of these variables are coming in, not because they are actually in the standard instruments, but because I got them from someone else. So I have to check and align them to my work. Then where the index is not in the questionnaire, this one actually is constructed. I constructed it based on the indicators of household wealth. For instance, the type of household is having a radio, bicycle, and having. That's how I came up with this wealth index. I use this PhD correlation to test for multicollinearity. So these variables which I put in the model were not related. How did I build indicators at the end? For instance, these indicators of the dimensions of cost of time. Actually, these indicators were built in the process of using this approach of fact analysis, which helps me to reduce the variables. So these indicators are among those ones which had high loading magnitude that were identified by using value criteria to be actually further analyzed. That's how I came up with these indicators. Because good enough, I had collected data about them. Some indicators are positive and others are negative. I think, again, I need to go back and look at these variables and see whether I can analyze and see the outcome of them. I think so far is the issue.
So I'll go on and maybe I'll try and go to the end now. Chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8 about physical health, intimacy, social participation, and quality of life presents your main results. They all follow the same structure and bring out systematic results on the determinants of satisfying physical health, intimacy, social participation, and so on. So the tables are very informative, very clear, very well presented, and I really liked the graphs also that you presented us in your oral presentation, and I think those were very nice, the figures there. So I think what is very interesting in the results is that however much the three components of quality of life presented vary according to the characteristics of the older persons, quality of life itself, so you see they have many significant, and we saw it in the presentation, many statistically significant variables that are associated with them. But quality of life itself has not so many. So it means that quality of life is rather stable in the end. It shows that in a way there are compensations from one domain to the other. So someone maybe would have good physical health, might have poor social participation, or the contrary, you see? So in the end, it comes to people being more or less average, fair, in terms of quality of life. And we see that actually in your model, this is the bulge of the population actually is in the fair state. And that's interesting. That's interesting. There's only a few variables that stick out in the end as making differences. So what I would like to ask is that I've noticed that sometimes not the same variables are presented in the first part of each chapter and in the second part. So in the bivariate analysis, you have some variables, and then in the logistic models, you have other variables that come up, or maybe some variables that were dropped. So why so? So for instance, in chapter 5, distance to the nearest health center is in one but not in the other. In chapter 6, it's the case for having children. In chapter 7, and so on. So I would like you to tell us why you dropped some variables or why you didn't keep them. Then, in each of these chapters on physical health, intimacy, and social participation, you do not use the same variables as independent variables. So it's true that some variables are only interesting for the study of specific domains, or maybe they're more interesting for the study of specific domains. For instance, the source of support in healthcare is relevant for studying the physical health. So there's a clear link there, maybe that you would like to assess through the statistical model. But however, you didn't include it in intimacy, while it mainly concerns the domestic, the close family sphere, because it's mainly spouses and children who actually give their care. So why doesn't it appear in intimacy? It would have been interesting to have it there. Occupation, on the other hand, is a very general variable that you usually find everywhere. And in your work, it wasn't used for physical health, for instance, however much it could be related. So I would like to actually ask you why you left out and why you didn't take the same variables for each of the analysis. Because finally, in chapter 8, we're summarizing all these previous models. And then so some of the variables that are there actually weren't studied thoroughly through the previous variables. And there's even one variable that doesn't appear anywhere else in the previous chapters. It's domestic health. Domestic health suddenly appears for measuring the quality of life or assessing the determinants of quality of life when it hasn't been studied in physical health, in intimacy, or in social participation. Then I would like to say that when you're discussing your findings, and I really like the way you actually use the literature and the findings from the qualitative and quantitative analysis together in this discussion. But when discussing the findings, sometimes think you should keep in mind that in all the analysis that you do, you're just looking at correlations. No causality is implied by the results. Therefore, you cannot interpret your results in one direction. You cannot say that your findings show that one thing has an effect on something else, or that there's a strong influence of this on that, without saying that the contrary might also be true. So I would like, this is very important because you will see it has serious implications. For instance, you explained to us the link between physical activity and physical health. But this correlation you've measured might also show that physical health prevents bad physical health and prevents you from going into physical activity. You know, and this is very basic. When you're sick and you're afraid and you're too weak, you cannot go into doing activity. In what you're measuring, which is cross-sectional, you do not have causality. So you cannot say that it's not exercising that actually leads to having poor health. Then this comes in also, and this maybe will be some relief to you, I hope. It comes in about the link between children supporting their parents and poor health of the parents. Because what you see, that actually there's a correlation between children supporting their parents and the parents being in poor health. It doesn't mean that it's because the children are supporting them that they're in poor health. It might just mean that the children are there for them when the parents actually have problems. You see? And then I would like to ask you about quality of life more specifically. It shows in your qualitative part about quality of life that there's a shift in the way you write yourself between quality of life that appears in the first paragraphs and well-being that appears in the next ones. So what stands out of the interviews is that actually when you ask people about their quality of life, they tell you about their well-being, and what they think is their well-being, they actually mention family support, wealth, assets, housing issues. They don't mention the other dimensions, or actually we don't see in your dissertation that they mention other dimensions of quality of life, such as physical health, for instance, or actually intimacy. So it would be really interesting to address that. If I go back to your questionnaire, I saw that in the questionnaire you have a question on the quality of life, whereby you ask respondents to actually rate their quality of life. So this is a very important question in regard to your topic. Yet, I don't see any results of it, I don't see any analysis of that, and I think this would have been very valuable to actually compare what the outcome of this question is and what you actually measure through your model. So I was going to ask you whether you looked at this question and at its results. Then chapter 9 presents a summary of the findings before drawing conclusions and recommendations, and I particularly like the summary of the findings. Very concise, very powerful, very nice. But the next section is the conclusion, and in the conclusion you're supposed, and that's what you're trying to do, to go back to your hypothesis from the background chapter, and to actually answer them all, check, validate or invalidate each of them. But I haven't found the number 3, the number 5, and the number 8 there, so I was wondering what of them. If I go back to hypothesis number 3, number 5, and number 8, financial support influences social participation, quality of life does not depend on the age of the respondents, marital status influences the quality of life of the respondents. We have no answer about these. And then I'm just noting that in the recommendation section, at the moment, your recommendations are a bit far away from what you actually studied. So I feel a bit worried about that. Maybe there's some part of the analysis that I didn't see. But for instance, you're saying on page 143 that one of the domains that policies should look at, that results from your work, is intimate partner violence among both the young and older persons. So I haven't seen anything on intimate partner violence, so I'm wondering how you derive that from your work. In conclusion, I would like to say that this PhD dissertation presents original analysis made on a corpus of qualitative and quantitative data that is new, that were collected for the purpose. It deals with a theme on which there is scattered research. It uses a methodology that is specific, brings out many new elements. It's therefore a very precious contribution to present knowledge. I learned a lot myself when reading you, especially about the quality of life methods that I didn't know. And I think it does provide a good basis for a number of papers that you see you've already gone into the process of publishing, and that's very good. But for a scientific point of view, I think many things can still be improved, maybe in the coming months, and in the papers you're going to write or review. And so I think one of the points would be, at least in the conclusion, that all over the dissertation also, to take a wider perspective on your work. Yet, always sticking to the research directions that you've documented, but maybe finding a way to make them wider. So I would like maybe to ask you a final question, and then I'll stop there and I'll let you answer. I know time is running. If I understand right, in your model, your methodology, you, in the end, give the same importance when measuring the quality of life of older people to all the different dimensions that are taken into account. So, for instance, you give the same importance to physical health, to intimacy, or to social participation in the building of the final indicator of quality of life, because it's built on the evaluation of these three dimensions, right? So I noticed, for instance, that I noticed that the results in the last section on quality of life are somehow similar or very close to the ones that were found on intimacy. But isn't that related to the fact that in this model, because intimacy is put at the same level as the other dimensions, and because it's built only on 4 questions instead of 7 or 8, then it means you give more power to these questions than you give to the others. So you give more power in your analysis to, for instance, the question about sexual relations than to different dimensions of physical health itself. So how do you see that? Do you think that in Uganda today, when you're an older person, these 3 dimensions of quality of life have the same weight, have the same importance in the 4 regions that you studied? And do you think that the weight that you're giving to each of the components of these dimensions of quality of life couldn't be balanced in a way? I saw that in your questionnaire you also have questions about the importance of some facts, of, for instance, having friends, having relatives or a close family, different dimensions like that are asked, different questions that are asked about the importance of these dimensions for the person. So I haven't seen you taking these into account. Have you tried? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barel. Any comments? Rest to 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll begin with the question on some variables are in one model and not in another. This one I did it in consultation with literature and how some of the variables were behaving, especially while I was testing multicollinearity. But in any case, I can still try and see whether I can incorporate all of them together. In discussion and findings, this was maybe a mistake. I shouldn't actually interpret my findings in one direction. I'm going to see how to correct this. again, basing on what is in the literature. On quality of life and well-being, somehow, maybe somebody can easily get confused. I think, yeah, I need to revisit my work, read it, and be consistent with the concept to use, so that people are able to follow without getting confused about the two concepts, because they may not necessarily mean the same thing. The conclusion is, I'm going to make sure that my conclusion is aligning well with the study hypothesis. And at the same time, I also acknowledge that somehow I made some mistakes when I was writing my recommendations. I'll make sure that I based these recommendations on the findings so that the whole picture of the policies being advocated for is clear. The results in one dimension are close or somehow similar to another. Maybe looking at the context of Uganda, I think this is because of the question of homogeneity. Some other persons in Uganda, the way the life they live, matter they may not be in the same geographical locations. The challenges they face are more or less, if not the same, similar. That's what I think maybe has caused this closeness or similarity of the findings for one dimension. I thank you.
Thank you. Let's clap for Fred. And thank you so much for concurring with almost 90% of the comments, questions raised by the opponents. We expected an academic debate or exchange where you could concur or give your independent opinion because you are an expert in this area. So before we proceed, I would like to recognize the presence of our principal, college principal, Professor Isari Elia. Most welcome, Professor. Other point to observe. We are trying to manage time because we are being guided by a framework here. So let's now open up to the examination committee or panelists, where I happen to be one of them. This one should take not more than 20 minutes. And please, let's ask key questions that we think are burning or comments that can help Fred improve his thesis. Maybe before I go to this stage, Dr. Veral, are you convinced? Thank you so much. So you have passed the first litmus test before we go to the second stage. So I have two comments, Mr. Fred. The first one is on sampling. You mentioned the Kayunga and the Bugiri. And some of our friends who seem to come from this region, from Bugiri to Kayunga, you can cruise for only 45 minutes. And when you look at the demography of these two districts, someone can say Kayunga is for Basoga, and Bugiri the same. And yet Kayunga is representing what? The central. Am I correct? So what is the rationale here of choosing Kayunga, not Masaka? That we all know. Then, second question is on the interaction effect. Actually, the analysis you did here was good, but what if you did some more interactions, for example, in trying to find out a male with secondary level education, what is the likelihood of being physically healthy compared to a female with no level of education? Things like that, such that we get to the bottom line of what intervention is to make to improve the quality of life of the elderly. Then the third one is on the welfare index. I know you could be using an asset items. I would love that you be more explicit methodologically on how you come up with this welfare index. Because I know that a welfare index using assets, you have to compare with a lookup table. There are some lookup tables that already customized by World Bank, where you compare the score of the index with the poverty profile in that table. Otherwise, thank you so much. You may respond now or later. I hand over the microphone to my immediate left, Dr. Stephen Wandera, to give his questions or comments. Thank you.
Fred, thank you very much. I have just 3 questions for you, but I want to say it was nice seeing you present and talk about your research. It's a long way. One question is, one of the things you talk about in the methodology is weighting. And you say that you weighted the analysis, but you don't explicitly say how the weights were constructed. Did you come up with the weights yourself? And what happened? And second question is about social participation. You showed in the other domains for quality of life, you were using the Likert scale, and where you have strongly agreed to strongly disagree. When it came to social participation, you used binary indicators with yes and no. And I'm wondering why this changed. If at all it's a WHO standard tool, is it measured that way, or you chose to modify it? Lastly, in the recommendations, you talk about SAGE programs, and I was thinking about SAGE, which is the Social Assistance Grant for Empowerment. You had opportunity to have 4 districts. I kept wondering why you refer in the recommendations to SAGE, but you actually don't tell us whether one of the districts was a beneficiary of SAGE. It's not very clear. And I think I would just help you that the confusion you have about the number of FGDs and key informant interviews, in the presentation you have them, but in the document actually you don't state them. We talk about 2, so it's something that we need to just revise and clarify the numbers in the document. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On my right, you have something to say? Okay. So we go to Dr. Alex.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Yes, Fred, I congratulate you so much because I know the journey that you walked through, right from the beginning to the end. And I'm really happy that you're at this level. And I'm looking forward to seeing you more powerful than now. Okay? So I really commend your work. It is very good work. You have good writing style. And it's really comprehensive work. One question that I would want to ask you is about, it's not really actually a question, it's just about your recommendation on HIV programs and regarding elderly people. You know, there are programs for HIV currently that are also benefited, the elderly people benefit from. But the unfortunate thing about these programs that are not age-friendly, you know, when the elderly go there, they meet doctors who are young in age, so there is an age gap that acts as a barrier for them to open up for them. So you can't believe being cancelled by a young child, you know, asking you how many times you've had sex with you have any boyfriend, you have any, you know, they are quite challenging. So you need to advocate for age-friendly programs that suit the elderly people. They should be counseled by elderly counselors so that that age gap is closed. And then there are also no geriatricians right now in the country, which is something very crucial now. Nobody is specialized in treating the elderly people in the country at the moment. So it's becoming a challenge. They end up being given Panadols, aspirin and so on, because of the joint pains they get, the various diseases they get. But nobody is really specialized in treating them. So that is a recommendation that should come out in order to help these people improve their quality of life in terms of health. Yeah, and then probably the other issues include a definition of terms in your thesis, at least in the preliminary pages, so that the reader is able to know the operational terms that you're using for ease. Yeah, the other issues on the interviews and focus group discussion, you don't tell us how long the interviews were conducted. Please tell us how long they were conducted, and then give us the details of which people did you actually interview ground. Okay, I'm sure in the districts there are about 1 or 2 by the way per district. So it's a justification that you purposely selected these people because they are knowledgeable and they work with older persons. So tell us those exact people that you interacted with. That is.
Thank you, Doctor. I think Dr. Ravana, you can take comments, questions when you respond at once.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. One observation and one question. The observation is on aging policy, and I'm referring to the manuscript. This is on page 16. You do very well when you look at the aging frameworks, MIPA, IPAA, PFPA, and our very own population policy on older persons. But I think there is something missing, and this is on Africa's Agenda 2063, which is a framework for inclusive growth and sustainable development for Africa in the next 50 years. In fact, goal number 1 of this framework is about standard of living and quality of life for all. My suggestion is you include this in your narrative. The second is a question, and I pick this from the proposed research agenda, which I find presented on page 146. You suggest a number of important areas for future research, but I think there is something that is missing. First of all, you've done very well on older persons in rural Uganda, but do we know much about older persons in urban Uganda? WHO advocates for age-friendly cities, and Kampala is not one of these. Try to look at a scenario where an older person, especially one who has never been to Kampala, is trying to cross Bentuanuka Street to catch a taxi and go for socialization, which we are studying. Even younger people these days find it an uphill task to move in this city. So what about older persons, especially those who are new to the city? And because of that, I want to find out from you whether you would like to propose that future studies be done in urban Uganda, and if so, what kind of specific inquiry would you propose? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raul. Professor?
coming in.
Okay, it's okay.
Having been a midwife of this cases, I prefer to come in late.
Actually, I have been advised that you're not supposed to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Fred. I don't have any questions, but a few corrections and comments on the Maniragaba and qualitative presentation you have done. I will begin with a simple correction in the abstract. I am referring to the title. Please refer to your thesis. Okay? In the abstract, simple correction, the second paragraph, the very last sentence of the second paragraph, we talk of having HIV status. You are missing an adjective. Everybody has the HIV status. You mean positive or negative? Now, my main issue is on page 52. We have the two last paragraphs on that page are misleading because they are incorrect or because they are meaningless. If you take the last but one paragraph, you are saying that the number of factors to be retained was determined based on the Eisenhower criteria and the script law in Appendix 1. Now, are you trying to convince us that you go to the script law on page 169 and from there decided that you will retain physical error, intimacy, and physical participation from that script law? That is patently untrue. And in the next paragraph, the very first sentence on the scoring on the identified factors, in fact, you have written doesn't make any sense. You are saying they were calculated for each other person through linear combinations between observed and factor loading. That is a completely meaningless statement. I think those two paragraphs have to be rewritten. They read exactly what we read. The next comment I have is on page 8. On page 8, you give us a distribution of the respondents by the appointed right. But I think before you do that, you should give us the distribution of the respondents by each of the three components and the three dimensions you are dealing with. That is physical health, intimacy, and social protection. The next point is on page 86. Page 86. This is a correction. You are presenting the p-value for half square and calling it half square. And that is repeated on page 102, page 115, and page 131. Finally, if we go to page 99, page 99 in the last paragraph, I think you are confusing your dependent and independent variables. It should be region which trying to explain intimacy, not intimacy. Explaining region. You are mixing up the row and column percentages in that paragraph. And you repeat that mistake on page 113 and page 129. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, panelists, for the comments, questions. Any response? Or you concur with everything? Thank you. 5 minutes, please.
Dr. David Glass, thank you so much for the questions. First, there are a lot of Ntozi and Kwagala. When almost the same. As I said earlier, I used the simple random sampling. We finish all method to select the sample. So I could not go otherwise. Secondly, interaction of results. For instance, if I look at male educated older persons, and then I compare them with female educated older persons in terms of their quality of life, this would have very some interesting findings. I find this one a good observation, but I think I'll be able to do it in the forthcoming papers which I'm writing. Still waiting of data. I said this data was weighted to minimize imperfections which come as a result of selective unity and equal probabilities. Generally, the purpose of this is to reduce bias in the study findings. So this was done. Actually, we did not base on any standard instrument because this is an independent study. We generated these words. I mean, I generated these words itself. Social participation. That perhaps other that I mentioned are based on 4 Likert point scale. 4-point Likert scale. Social participation is binary. I said that this study is adapted from integrative theory of quality of life, but also the conceptualization was done picking some ideas from World Health Organization quality of life instruments with modifications. So this social participation is not put on 4 Likert scale because it was modified. So with this district, when I said I need to check and see whether some of the districts I listed had already started receiving SAFE, and then I have to adjust accordingly. Dr. Annette Nampwanga, you are guiding me, and I appreciate. I'm going to address the observations that have been made. Dr. Zawana makes an important observation, especially to do with proposing that the next study maybe should look at the quality of life of the older persons in urban areas. This is very important because the confusion now we have now in our cities. I am going there to propose so. Professor, thank you so much for the corrections, Professor Claire. I will adjust this as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maniragaba. So I think at this material point in time, I can open up for the general public. Please, as you ask or give a comment, give us your name, perhaps where you come from. You could be a minister or an ambassador, so we need to recognize you here. And be brief with the question or the comment. Thank you so much.
work.
Fred, that was brilliant. I don't have any questions for you. I just want to share my thoughts with you.
Who are you?
Sorry, I forgot that. My name is Peter Chisache. I'm from the Department of Population Studies. You argue consistently in the thesis that it's because of menopause that women have poor quality of life compared to men.
Not really.
And I'm just asking myself here. So, yes, they reach menopause, they don't want to have sex. Okay. I thought the quality of life is something you need, you can't achieve. Yeah. So they reach menopause, they don't want to have sex. I don't know how that translates into quality of life. So the other question that keeps on coming up. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that you should have a question to say they have reached menopause, but are they interested in sex or not? Yeah, so they don't want to have sex, they have reached menopause, then you can reach that conclusion. Okay. Or it can be a very good plausible reason. The other question that keeps on coming up, they're asking you how you estimate or you computed the household wealth index. Now, you don't have to explain this, but when you read the DHS manual, compute this household wealth index using the asset-based approach, that's quite a number of limitations. I'm just trying to suggest that I think you want to consider that in the thesis. I'm not sure the thesis, but I think you want to highlight that in the thesis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fred, by the names of Alain Kabageni from the School of Statistics. Fred, I want to congratulate you for getting far and thank you so much for taking us through what you did this far. Mine is a follow-up, and I believe maybe there's an answer that you did give us, and there are two, maybe just to seek more clarification. And still one is related to the data weighting. How did you do it? Is there a specific variable that you use? How did you do it? I think it did come out clearly, and it is very good that you did the weighting as you mentioned in the methodology. And my last question that left me still wondering, it's about the selection of the two districts. You mentioned the fishbowl method that you used, but I would like to hear more. What is special about Kayunga and Bujiri in relation to the older persons?
Thank you.
I think after we have those this side. There's a microphone that side.
Thank you so much, Fred, for the good work. I think it was really beautiful work that you did. Emmanuel Bizmungu is my name, and I work for International Food Policy Research Institute. I have one particular question. When I look at your work, you used, under methodology, you used fact analysis. And we know that is one of the data reduction techniques, but we also know there are other, data reduction techniques, methodologies you could have looked at. So I'm wondering why did you choose that particular one? Yet we have, for example, cluster analysis, we have principal component analysis, and maybe latent class analysis. So I think in your explanations in your work, you did not give the advantages and disadvantages of each, and then how you arrived at the particular one you used. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This side.
Yes, when I was reading looking at the stakeholders that he consulted, the permissions and so on, I saw Office of the President, and I know that this is a very well scientifically written publication, PhD thesis, and there are papers and others which are coming up. But I think that if I refer to Office of the President and some other older persons to which the results of this could be useful, maybe it might be better to think of some other lighter publications. For instance, a policy brief or something to make sure that this goes beyond just the library and beyond the utilization by scientists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Congratulations, Fred. My name is Rehman Namaganda from the School of Medicine. I'm a PhD student in LG also. I don't have questions for you, but just two issues for you to think about. The first one is on ethics. On your ethics slide, you of course presented the normal ethics process, but I was very curious to know if you found any other ethical dilemmas beyond clearing your study with the ethics boards. You might, if you did, you might consider reflecting more on them and probably including them in your thesis, because from my personal experience, I've had a lot of ethical issues working with elderly people, issues of consent, issues of material expectations from researchers, and issues of their ill health, and how you had to deal with such issues personally, and your emotional involvement. So those could be issues that you might want to think about and include if you experienced any. And then the second one is about your research design. You mentioned a mixed methods design, but on the qualitative part, you were so brief. You said you analyzed your data using thematic content analysis, something like that. But I was personally cheated. I didn't see any themes that you came up with, apart from a few quotations that you probably selected to back up your quantitative data. You might want to dig into your qualitative data, and I'm sure those explanations and narrations could be very, very useful in backing up some of your findings. I think you are a quantitative researcher, and that might explain less interest in qualitative work, but I think if you take some more time to dig up those responses from your respondents, it would be very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very good comment.
Mr. Chair, when you were the question goes to the chair. Okay, Mr. Chair, it's not a question to the chair per se, but when the chair was asking Fred, he talked about the interaction. I think even open it. Mike, what I want to ask is benefit Fred. If the effect is not significant, does it really make sense to have an interaction effect?
I also have, Fred, I also have two questions.
Yes.
Yeah, one is on the translation of the instrument. My name is Anthony Tirengana from CoBAMS. You said you translated the instrument and you are doing research in 4 districts. That means you had to translate the instrument into 4 districts, but the presentation in the 4 languages rather, the presentation of your findings are in English. I don't know now, did you also translate the findings from the local language into English? And then when I look at your quotations, they are in English. So I need to know how that would happen. On your slide number 20, slide number 25, if you can go to that, I see a picture. I am wondering where this picture was taken from, which district, if you can go back. 25. Go back a bit, I think. No. No, that one. That one. I'm wondering in which district this is. But also, maybe that is Rutiri. But also on your conceptual framework, if you can also go to the conceptual framework, I say disconnect, conceptual framework. Yes, I don't see how the underlying factors, the intermediate variables and outcome variables are connected to the variables that you refer to actually. Because the other ones seem to be disconnected from the downside. So I think you need to do something about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Fred is conclude. I think most of them are comments. And
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I begin with Peter. He's wondering why I am actually not repeating the menopause issue in sex among women and how sex translates into quality of life. I am not actually repeating this because I am getting some piece of information from literature to make an explanation regarding what is happening, especially among women, the difference between, for instance, intimacy among women and men. The information I'm using, I'm simply borrowing it from literature. How I computed the wealth index, I should have borrowed a leaf from UPHS. Indeed, I did, but maybe to say that some of the variables which are used in the computation of wealth index in the various DHs, I do not have all of them, but I used the ones I have. So I used the ones I had to construct the line. How did I weight my data? Of course, this one is a question of practicability. And I used some commands. But maybe, well, I don't know how much I can explain this one. I used SPY command, I don't know how. But I don't know much. Maybe I will need to have to list the source and then read and clarify. Thank you. Selection of the two districts and what is the special? I already said that I used simple random sampling with the method of broad fish method, and usually I could not detect the outcome of the sampling technique. So here on this one again, I don't have much to say. Why did I use fact analysis and not any other better reducing method? Because I found fact analysis very easy to do. Charles, yes, it is good the findings from this study really can help to improve the quality of life of older person is in the country. So the police have brief, and others in people who are going to be writing some of these briefs and presenting them purposely in some conferences. Ethics, the dilemma I could have encountered in the field, for instance, to do with emotions, it is true that other persons, as I said, are not supported fully. The moment you go to the field and start interacting with them, they will be expecting a lot from you. But even that I'm a teacher, I know how to act. I know how to talk to them and seek consent from them. But however, after interviewing an individual, I used to have a token of appreciation so that this other person believes that. But otherwise, emotions are there. Maybe add in this, make sure that ethics are not violated. My research assistants were well trained and with skills on how to deal with other persons and how to, administer these study instruments. With the qualitative findings, I have got many patterns which are very interesting, but these are a few selected ones. Attorney translation of instruments before languages, and then I'm presenting my findings in English. This one, how we translated our questionnaire, made sure that when there was a question in English, there was another question in the local language of that particular program, where we listed. I thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we are moving across. Maybe I will invite more for people to decide. Yes. Anybody. And if there are more people with comments, please, we can have more time to interact maybe after the session and you give ready comments to enrich his thesis. Any more comments, questions?
Being told I'm supposed to be quiet. Really good, keep me quiet on some businesses. There was a list of Kayunga, the list of Ujiri, the more person than Uganda. I'm not sure whether in Masakayu can give me an area with the majority of Uganda. It's very difficult. In fact, the whole of Uganda has been a true story or has been invaded by so many people from outside. It would be almost impossible. It's, an area where we really get to maybe Butambara, the used to call Mbale, or Mpiji, all the Mpiji, Butambara, Gombe, Maokota. Those are the areas the Uganda built where you had indigenous Uganda. But now with the urbanization, they have also been taken by other people from outside. So maybe I can stop there.
Something small on Fred had some photos from the field, but for purposes of confidentiality, he didn't want to display those on the screen. Because you need to get permission from the participants to show their photos. Ethics, yeah. So he chose now to show some photos which are in the public domain. That's why he cited the source. Yeah, the white people that you saw. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. One question. Thank you, Fred, for the presentation. My question is, when you are doing the sampling at the village level, and you make a listing of the 10 households in the village, and you reach there and you do not find any eligible person in that household, there is no person that is 60 and above, what method did you use to replace this household? Or you just took a list of households with older people in the whole village? Just one clarification.
I think Greg can respond. Yes. Thank you, Christian, for the good question. Indeed, it used to happen. But the moment I could find that this household does not have other persons, when they are not there, I used to go to the next or the closest household, someplace.
So, thank you, colleagues, for those wonderful comments. So we have reached a decisive moment. Having heard from Fred and the general public, I will provisionally close this session and we will retreat. And in that retreat, I want only the examination committee members to deliberate, particularly on the performance and the grading of the candidates. Then thereafter we shall come back and make the final pronouncements. But please kindly keep around. I don't know whether the secretariat is entertaining you drinks and what. It will take us about 10 minutes. So kindly, committee members, let's retreat the next room. Thank you.
This is my social protection.
Welcome back. I just had to go back.
This is Phenomena PhD.
You will be asked
Moon
for
viewing.
introduction. Yes.
Yeah, we listen sometimes to chat some things. Now, you know.